Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Coyne, and with me today I have two students from 2806, Mel
and Natso.
and Natso.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about week one's tutorial. Now this is just a brief overview, so it's really important that you actually engage in the work yourself. So our first activity that we did was talk about team-based learning and why teams are important as a clinician. And we had then that opportunity to really look at learning together, sharing ideas. And also the first part of that was a little game that we looked at, which was either to share two truths and a lie, or to tell something different about yourself. And Mel, how did you find that game?
Yeah, it was actually really good, very interactive. So I had a couple of people in our little group that I didn't know, so it really helped to sort of get to know where they've been and where they want to go.
Yeah, excellent. And it's great. So every week that we come into tutorials, we're in slightly different groups because we have students that are not able to come. And so every week I think it's getting to know a few more people, a few more students from your cohort. So each week we start off first up doing a team-based quiz. And so first you do it individually, and then we sort of look at how you went and discuss it with your peers in your team. And then we looked at sort of the answers overall. So Mel, how did you go in that first team-based quiz? Did you find that you sort of had understood the answers or in the questions?
Yeah, so we sort of, there was a few of us in the little group, and we sort of back and forth which one would be the right one, and it sort of helped us come up with the right answer in the end.
Yeah, and that's what you do in clinical, because you don't ever know all the answers when you're a registered nurse, but you do have that team to back you and to go through some ideas with. So that's the purpose of the team learning. So we're just going to go through some of these questions now, and I know we're sort of standing in front of the thing, so we'll all move around as well. And so the first of the questions really looked at sort of what is research. And we talked about sort of this aspect of building a body of knowledge, whether we were sort of looking at validating improvements or the actual healthcare efficiency and cost effectiveness. And the answer was all of them. And it's really research is to sort of build and improve practice. We then talked about the different aspects that knowledge has traditionally come from, and we talked about personal experience, authority figures, and intuition. It was interesting this because the students really talked about this essence of personal experience and where that came from, coming from your own family experience, but also where you've worked and where you've been and what else you've done in life. And authority figures range from sort of, just those RNs working with you that were a higher level, to the nurse managers, to even sort of the actual hospital organisations, to government policies, which all influence and provide us with knowledge for our clinical research and our clinical, what we're doing as a clinician. One of the things that was interesting was intuition. Now, not to put Mel on the spot, but how did you find that essence of intuition and, that sort of developing that sort of gut feeling for something?
Oh, I don't know how to answer this one. I suppose talking to peers and sort of trying to get a better essence about what the situation is and seeing how they go about it, therefore seeing how I would then look at it and go about it that way.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that, when you're a clinician, it's not just about sort of understanding what is, that knowledge and where it's come from, your textbooks, but it is about bringing it all together. And we also talked about sort of that aspect of improving practice, and so how we do that. And it's interesting. Do we want to really improve practice by trial and error? Not really. And so that's where research has come from. So when we also then the next lot of questions really related to about the what was evidence and how do we understand this, and we talked about the fact that I'm out of screen. That it was we're looking at your research and where it's come from, the level of this. It was really that sort of that clinical inquiry, and this became our understanding. We talked also about evidence-based practice and how it was a whole, the series of 5 questions, but really important to sort of look at that asking appraising, evaluation, and a sort of focus on not one in particular, but the whole process. One of the things that we looked at in relation to evidence-based practice was its ability to be translated to other areas. And we talked about rural and remote, and whether or not they could sort of, if you were looking at research, was it able to be translated? And so one of the things that we looked at was actually in relation to looking at the setting from the research article. We looked then at the levels of evidence in relation to systematic reviews or anecdotal evidence. And one of the things that we identified is that we really wanted to have a systematic approach. And we talked about this even in our clinical, where we are looking at evidence. We build that together systematically as we're doing patients' observations, understanding best practice, maybe looking at guidelines, and sort of building this a whole base of evidence for us to sort of make sure that what we're providing to the patients is best practice. And then we sort of, the last two questions, we're really looking again at that sort of clinical expertise and experience.
Don't want to blush.
And so one of the things that, and maybe sort of the two of you can think about, sort of, what was the sort of difference between this clinical expertise and professional experience?
So the clinical expertise is more like something that they've come up with in the field, rather.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
The professional experiences.
So professional experiences would have been more like learning from a book. Like you understand the practices because of what is written. I think I've said that wrong.
Yes, you have.
Yes.
But that's right. Flip that around. But that's the beauty of team-based learning, because then you're understanding and it's sort of reinforcing. And so, yes, clinical expertise was about sort of learning. So whether you've done bachelor, master's, gone on to do further research, maybe specific about your area, whether professional experience was maybe sort of the person that had worked in the same area for many years.
So it's pretty much more of the experience that you go out there in the field and apply it.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. And when you've got the expertise, it's where you've sort of got the understanding of why you're doing this.
Okay.
And one of the students discussed that sort of, enrolled nurses who may have been working in the area a long time, sometimes have a lot of experience, but may not understand the rationale behind of what they're doing, or, particularly why, where you as, even as new graduates have the latest evidence-based knowledge. We also looked at then sort of, can you translate clinical guidelines to anyone? And one of the things that we decided is that you really needed to look at sort of it in relation to your patients, and so it may not be straight translatable. And one of the things that we talked about was that it was a guideline, and that's the thing, when you look at sort of, there's some things which are rules. We talked about medication, the rules, but we also talked about, best practice guidelines. And that was able to be then sort of discussed in the teams and really come up with some great ideas about sort of how that may make you a good clinician. So in summary, we just really just went through the practice quiz, a little bit more depth, had discussions about, the big basis of research and why we might do it, and about that sort of evidence-based practice. And then we went on to week 2, and hopefully in week 2 you'll all have looked at the modules and be ready for this week's quiz. Thank you.